States. I'm Matt Watts. I'm with Trimble. Trimble has a lot of applications and solutions, software, technology, hardware for asset lifecycle management. So that includes software for planning, design, procurement, construction, operations, and management. And that's our Trimble Owner and Public Sector Group. You may have seen us in other places as well. But today, what we're going to be talking about with this distinguished group of panelists is hydrogen, right? So how can hydrogen be used to transition the way that we're utilizing energy today to reduce carbon and to do some really exciting things. And so to start things off, I'm going to ask my panelists here to take a minute and introduce themselves, and we'll start with Mark.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Mic check.
There we go.
There we go, live.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Mark Chung. I'm with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory based here in Golden, Colorado. For those that don't know, NREL for short is a federally funded national laboratory, 1 to 17. Our objective is to do R&D around renewable technologies, and then secondly, to try and bring these to commercial realization. My group's specific expertise and focus is on hydrogen, not only on hydrogen, but also economic feasibility of hydrogen projects. So we spent a lot of time figuring out how economic these projects may or may not be, and how do we get them to economic viability in the longer term. So with that, I'll pass it on to Greg.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to be here this morning. I'm Greg Kleen from the United States Department of Energy. Specifically, I'm in the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies Office. I've been there for 15 years, in the hydrogen fuel cell space for 20 years. And we're really looking in on the medium and heavy duty truck space. That's been certainly a focus of mine here recently. And I'm working with our other offices, Vehicle Technologies Office, Bioenergy Technologies Office, looking at what can we do to decarbonize the medium and heavy duty truck sector by 2050. And just to give a quick stat to show how important the heavy duty long haul truck space is, if you look at the transportation sector, only 5% of the vehicles are heavy duty long haul trucks. And they travel 10% of the total miles, but they have about 30% of the total emissions in the sector and the amount of fuel that they use. So really is an important area to be looking into.
Thanks.
Good morning. My name is John Messner. I'm a commissioner with the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission, formerly called the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission. In 2023, there was legislation that expanded the authority of what was then the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, to include authorities over deep geothermal development, carbon capture and sequestration, underground natural gas storage, and other emerging technologies, including studying permitting regulations and policies around hydrogen. It also changed our name from the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission to the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Excited to be here this morning.
Excellent. Thanks for that, John. So I think we've got an interesting discussion here with real experts, right? So you think about hydrogen. Well, what do we all know about hydrogen? Probably not a heck of a lot. These guys do. So I think an interesting opportunity to learn something today about hydrogen. And one of the things that, to go back to core principles of what we do and who we are, when we look at things like this, is sometimes to follow the money, right? And so today, we are going to follow the money that is going to be discussed by Greg, right? So Greg is with Department of Energy, and the funding that's coming, the federal funding that's coming to support hydrogen is massive. If you look at our nation and where we stand today, we have around $34 trillion in national debt. I saw the other day that if you take all of the equity from all of the homes that we all own here in the United States, there's about $32 trillion in equity. So if we sold all of our homes and we donated that equity to the federal government, we could almost pay off the national debt. So if we're spending all that money, we're borrowing all that money, I think it'll be good for us to get a little bit of understanding of where we're spending that money, where that funding is coming from, and look forward to you sharing what you can there, right? So go ahead, Greg.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just to give some perspective, during my 15 years at DOE, we've had, for hydrogen fuel cells, we've had kind of annual budgets around $100 to $200 million per year. With the bipartisan infrastructure law, they passed $9.5 billion for hydrogen and fuel cells. So $8 billion of that for hydrogen hubs to create hubs where there's an ecosystem for hydrogen production and hydrogen end uses such as fuel cells or decarbonizing industrial processes such as steel. And then also with $1.5 billion of that is for manufacturing and recycling, most of it towards manufacturing. And we announced just a few months ago $750 million for fuel cell and electrolyzer manufacturing, and there's $850 billion that added onto that by industry with their cost share. So we're talking, really significant funding here, and let's see. There's I mean, there's certainly more. I think one thing. So with that manufacturing funding, this is really going to enable high volume automated stack manufacturing processes. So we're really getting towards reducing the cost of manufacturing, enabling large scale fuel cell and electrolyzer production, and that's going to, I think, really bring costs down and really provide a lot more opportunities for hydrogen fuel cell deployments. So that's big funding, but things are actually even better with the Inflation Reduction Act that passed tax credits for tax credits to build manufacturing, and there's fuel cells and electrolyzer companies that got that funding in round one. Round two is coming up, actually. There's concept papers due June 21st. A lot of battery companies obviously got that funding as well. And there's a big one that hasn't been fully defined yet, but 45V is a tax credit for hydrogen production, and that's up to $3 per kilogram credit. That could be worth tens of billions of dollars. So really, when you add all this up, it's very, very significant.
Hundreds of billions eventually, right? If you add all these together. So that's one of the places we're spending our money. Good to know that, right? Mark, one of the things I thought you might take a minute to discuss is kind of the state of the industry. Where are things at with regard to actually putting this into production, actually putting it into utilization, some real practical hands-on applications of that. Can you share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really interesting time to be in hydrogen right now. So as Greg mentioned, there's hundreds of billions of dollars being deployed to support hydrogen. Right now, we actually do produce it. There's about 10 million metric tons that's produced per year, mostly from natural gas, and it's also consumed in the oil and gas business right now to hydrotreat diesel. But with the hydrogen hub money that DOE is spending, they are enabling infrastructure growth, right? So what we're going to see this summer is 8 different hydrogen hubs, formally announce which of their projects are going to get funded. So we're going to start to really see this ecosystem develop across the country. So California, Texas, Minnesota, the Northeast, there's 8 different hubs where this money is going to be spent, and we're going to actually start to see ecosystems be built outside of actually Texas. Most of it exists in the Texas and Gulf Coast area. So it'll be really interesting to see how this develops. We'll have different production modes, so you can produce hydrogen via electrolysis, like Greg was alluding to earlier. So that's clean water and electricity, or water and electricity basically from renewable resources to produce hydrogen, or you can produce it via natural gas and capture that carbon and store it underground. And we'll see many end uses as well. Transportation is going to be one of them. Heavy-duty transport is a key area that we'll probably see develop, especially in California. Then we might see power generation sources and ammonia and chemical processes get deployed. So exciting time, and this is really just DOE is a catalyst for all this happening over the next several years. And this summer will be really interesting to see how what gets announced and what's actually going to go into the ground in the coming 3 to 5 years.
Are you seeing some of these federal funding opportunities applied to some of the projects that you guys are engaged with?
Oh, absolutely. We work hand in hand with DOE all the time and industry as well. So with industry partners, we typically form creatives to, solicit DOE money and, research, spend R&D in these technologies to make them more commercially viable, improve their efficiencies, continue to bring these to maturity. And on the analysis side, which is what my team basically does, is we spend a lot of time de-risking this kind of investment for DOE. So we do a lot of analysis on how to integrate these systems, how to de-risk them from a financial and technical perspective to make sure that the money that gets spent, gets spent wisely, and that we see projects take off and have a long, sustainable lifetime.
Okay, that's interesting. So John, it was interesting to me to hear the history of your agency, right, and how you guys have transitioned the name now to the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. I'm from Texas. I flew in yesterday, and as I was flying into Denver, I saw some pretty impressive fracking operations out there close to the airports. But tell us a little bit maybe about what Colorado is doing with regard to hydrogen. Do you guys have some projects that you're working on? Do you have some things that you're engaged with there?
Sure. And I will tell you that Texas does have to get with the times because it's still the Texas Railroad Commission in Texas that regulates oil and gas, which I think is hilarious.
Somewhere, right?
But Colorado is taking some steps around hydrogen. And there was legislation that was passed in 2023 that directed the Energy and Carbon Management Commission to undertake studies to look at the potential for hydrogen development in the state of Colorado and understand a lot of different aspects around that from a regulatory and permitting and policy standpoint. And so that study is actually coming out in July, so next month. And the objectives of that study are, number one, to review and summarize the types of hydrogen transportation, storage, and other operations associated with hydrogen. Number two, to prepare an overview of known and potential risks associated with hydrogen infrastructure. Number three, to assess leak monitoring technologies. Number four, to gather data on hydrogen initiatives, best practices, and case studies to identify trends, opportunities, challenges, and policy recommendations. Number five, to review and evaluate all existing federal and state permitting of hydrogen infrastructure. And number six, to create a detailed mapping of jurisdictional responsibilities and to highlight any regulatory gaps. And so, like I said, that study is all but complete at this point. It'll be published and out to the public in July. That's our first big step in the hydrogen space to really understand the landscape, understand the things that we need to be thinking about, and start to develop the structure to both enable hydrogen development, but also ensure that that development is developed in a way that is protective of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, which is essential to the mission of the Energy and Carbon Management Commission.
Okay, thanks, John. So Mark, next, thought we might talk a little bit more about some really practical applications, right? About what you guys are seeing for real hands-on utilization of hydrogen. And is there any particular project that you can speak to that you've seen get traction, get support, and that you think is, if this is where it's going, this is the place that it's going to really work?
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So a background on hydrogen. So hydrogen is extremely interesting because it serves as an energy vector. Some people confuse it to be a resource, and it's not technically a resource, at least the way we consider it today. I say that because we take electricity and water and we convert that to hydrogen, and then we save that hydrogen for storage or usage for electrification again later on, right? So it's just a movement of the electron. Some cases where I see it being deployed, you have to really look at the willingness to pay from the end user, right? Hydrogen by nature is a very light element. It's the lightest element on the table. Therefore, making it very hard to store, transport, and basically manage, right? So that in turn raises the cost of the entire process. So there's a huge challenge right there off the bat. So willingness to pay is really important, right? Understand the consumers and how much they're willing to pay and what existing fuel or source are they trying to displace currently. So diesel makes a lot of sense, like Greg was saying before. In heavy-duty transports, why hydrogen makes a lot of sense in these long haul, in these Class 8 tractor trailers, is that batteries are very heavy, they're dense, and that if you put a battery on a truck, you reduce its payload capacity. If you do that, you make less money, right? There's basically less revenue for the owner of that truck. So hydrogen, if you can fuel it in faster times than the battery and its lighter, you can store 80 kilograms of it roughly on board, and the range is 400 to 500 miles, right? So you get really good efficiencies out of a fuel cell electric vehicle from a heavy duty truck. So that, I think, is one aspect where we're definitely going to see it be deployed in the immediate term. The second area is ammonia. Ammonia is an existing mature market that exists today. It's international. We have all the infrastructure in place to trade it today. And there's a willingness to pay, right? So people are willing to pay for a premium for clean hydrogen to produce their ammonia, which, if you don't know, goes into fertilizer, which subsequently supports food production. So a very viable source end use for hydrogen. Those are really the two key areas, I think, in the immediate term that we're going to see hydrogen get deployed. The third is probably backup power generation or supporting the grid, right? In California, for example, I can see hydrogen or fuel cells serving the grid when the power goes down for whatever reason, right? Hydrogen is there as a backup. It's an excellent long-duration energy storage tool. Batteries are great for less than 10-hour durations, but once you get past that 10-hour duration, hydrogen is where it's at. But then, you need storage, and so finding accessible underground geologic storage is really important to kind of support that. So those are the kind of three key areas that I've highlighted right now. There may be a couple more, but those are the three in the immediate term I see really getting traction.
Okay, that's interesting. It is when you look at, the big trucks, the commercial vehicles, the heavy trucks, and even the medium-duty trucks, right? It's completely impractical to say we need to put batteries on those. It's not going to work, right? A battery for an 18-wheeler is 20,000 pounds of batteries. Well, that reduces the payload from 80,000 to 60,000, and so it's not going to work for that. I have, back in Texas, a diesel pickup that we use on my farm, right? Well, you can't get the range that you need out of that. You see the Tesla super truck or whatever it is that they call it, right? Well, you're not able to use that to pull a trailer with cattle to the sale barn, right? So it's not going to be a practical application for it. But it sounds like what the DOE is doing, and your particular focus here, Greg, is working on the medium and heavy-duty trucks with hydrogen, and that could be a more promising application. Do you want to tell us what you guys are doing there?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I think you did a nice job of setting that up there. Obviously, so fuel cells and hydrogen are really good as you're going to larger vehicles that are traveling further distances, need to be refueled faster, and also are doing more work. So when you're talking about your pickup truck, it's not necessarily the largest vehicle in the world, but if you're towing, that's a lot of work, and you need. And so we have actually projects with Ford and GM under the Super Truck 3 program looking at medium-duty vehicles. It's really a key area that they've identified that class of vehicles does so much work. Even if they don't even travel that many miles in a day, the fuel cells are a great application for that. Another thing that's interesting is like utility bucket trucks that don't necessarily travel very far in any given day, but if there's a hurricane and they need to do disaster relief, they might need to travel 500 miles, 700 miles, 1,000 miles in a day or two to get down there, and then you don't know what the electric infrastructure is, obviously, when you're there. So those sort of vehicles, even though maybe batteries could handle it for 350 days a year, it can't do the full work that's required by those vehicles. But yeah, so I mean, certainly, heavy duty long haul trucks is a huge focus of ours. We have the Million Mile Fuel Cell Truck Consortium, which is 5 national labs really working on research development to reduce costs, improve performance and durability. And so we have the R&D side, and then I guess what I mentioned earlier with the introduction, we are looking at it really across all of the offices here. And so last year there was there's a national plan for decarbonizing the transportation sector that was released last January as a joint effort between DOE, DOT, HUD, and EPA. And now we're doing follow-on plans that are more detailed and provide more information uh, and more of a roadmap, milestones, et cetera. We're working on all of those plans and be planning on releasing those later this year. Medium duty and heavy duty sector, but also light duty vehicles, rail, maritime, looking at kind of all of those combined. And when you're looking at it at that broader view, there are opportunities to increase efficiency. For example, rail is very efficient, so if we can have more freight moved by rail, that provides opportunities to make the whole transportation sector more efficient.
Okay, thanks for that. So John, I'll set you up with 3 words that I think can encapsulate the fear that might be associated with hydrogen. Oh, the humanity. Remember that, the Hindenburg disaster, the hydrogen, what was it called? The blimp, right? It's not a blimp, they call it a dirigible, right? So it exploded. 37 out of 98 people on board died. It was a terrible tragedy. Those things were taking off in popularity. Global travel was starting to take place with these dirigible balloons. That was, I think, the 7th trip, transatlantic trip that the Hindenburg had taken. And on that 7th trip, it was fatal, right? And it caused a huge end to that industry. So the topic for you today is safety. It takes 5,000 to 10,000 pounds of pressure in a vessel for hydrogen. It's a lot of pressure. What are you guys seeing with regard to safety and hydrogen and its practical application in the real world?
Sure, thanks for that. And some of the safety things, I mean, the different jurisdictional responsibilities associated with safety and the different utilizations of hydrogen end up being one of the things that we're trying to really understand and study, to understand A, what overlaps are out there, and B, what gaps are there out there that we need to ensure that we've got clear policies and regulations associated with those in order to ensure that we're regulating in the safest way possible. And so currently, if you think about the different regulatory agencies that may have some jurisdiction over hydrogen, you're looking at FERC, you're looking at PHMSA, you're looking at CDPHE, which is the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment, from both an air standpoint and a water standpoint. You're looking at the Public Utilities Commission. You're looking at the Department of Oil and Public Safety. You're looking at the Department of Transportation. You're looking at the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. And I'm sure I'm missing some, right? And so, I mean, there's so many different agencies that would have some element of jurisdiction. And so that's why in the study that we're undertaking, we're really trying to understand the different jurisdictional responsibilities and try to create a clear roadmap and understanding of how we're going to address safety. I think on the other end of the spectrum, the safety aspect ultimately becomes or results from just misunderstanding or not being used to dealing with hydrogen. And so hydrogen's a very different thing than dealing with natural gas. And so we've got a lot of folks around that are comfortable with using natural gas from both a regulatory standpoint as well as from an upstream, midstream, or end user standpoint. And so how do we get that education and understanding to the different elements of the hydrogen utilization chain to make sure that as we are developing policies around public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources to ensure that it is safe and protective, that we're capturing and educating all the different elements that we need to accomplish. So.
Okay. Yeah, so safety is certainly a big deal, and it sounds like with all of those government agencies here to help, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, right? We should be able to come up with a complete and succinct plan in no time for how safety will be taken care of with hydrogen. So we're at the end of our time here. I don't know if Ken's going to come up and dismiss us to our break, or if you'd like for me to dismiss us to our break now, Ken. Ken's going to come up, so if you'll keep your seats here for just a moment. Give Ken a minute to take the stage, and while he's doing that, we'll give a big hand to our panel here today.